Welcome, everyone. This is Adriana Serna, Communications and Marketing Manager for the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association. On behalf of CHTA and CAF and our strategic partner, OBMI, I would like to welcome you all to our second webinar on which is a part of our series on sustainability. And before we get started on this second seminar, which is very exciting, and before introducing our CEO, Frank Comito, to introduce our speaker, just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items with everyone. The presentation, the webinar that you're going to hear today is a 30-minute long presentation. 20 of those minutes will be the speaker providing the detailed presentation that you're going to see. The last 10 minutes are going to be part of a Q&A session. I recommend that you, if you have any questions or any notes, to write them down during the presentation, because at the end, the last 10 minutes, you'll have an opportunity to chat in your questions. And the ones that we are not able to get to, Kevin will address via email. We'll provide you with our speakers' contact information so that you can have any additional questions answered that we were not able to get to during this webinar. With that said, I'm going to introduce Mr. Frank Comito to introduce you to our speaker.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for participating. We hope that this short period of time will be able to impact some information will be useful to you in your operation. Reducing energy costs is a high priority for the Caribbean Hotel Association and for the industry. It's one of our greatest aggregates, if you will. And we are seeing progress in that area, but we need to see much more. CHTA is involved in an energy efficiency program for hotels, supported largely by the United Development Bank, with the Caribbean Tourism Organization. About year 2.5 years through a multi-year program where that we audited in detail about 150 hotels throughout the region, and that information is being used by those individual hotels, but also is giving us the benchmark data that we will increasingly be sharing with the industry throughout the region. I'd like to introduce, I'd like to thank everyone who's participating, but also like to thank the Caribbean Alliance Sustainable Tourism, and Renee, who's here with us today, is one of the management of that initiative. I'd like to thank also OBMI, their company that provides strategic support to this area. We're so pleased to have another one of our strategic partners, and the family of companies that extended session, ETS. ETS is a global hospitality industry consulting firm, and we work with them on the Chico's Investment Conference, which will be held later this year. You would have received information on that. Also, you would have received information recently on our Chico's, our Chief Conference, the industry exchange forum, which will be held for 2 days in October in Puerto Rico. That will have a session on what we're talking about today, as well as other sustainable related sessions, operating and sales efficiency sessions, all here to time, earn greater revenue, and save expenses. But with us today from HES's division of energy and sustainability is a gentleman named Captain Goldstein, who will be conducting the session. Kevin is no stranger to the region. He's worked on the Bahamas, St. Lucia, and Anguilla, the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Spain, and other areas on a number of environmental related projects and energy efficiency projects. He's going to talk to us about how to enable the hospitality industry to enhance efficiency and maximize profitability, and demonstrates the positive commitment to the environment and stakeholders and investors. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, and we can take on. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And I'm just reading a couple of the comments here. I think a couple of folks are having a bit of difficulty in hearing us on this end. I will try and speak up. I'm not sure if it's a microphone issue. We're investigating on our end, but I'll try and speak up. And hopefully, if you can't hear me, I believe the webinar will be available after the fact for download. So if you're having audio difficulties now, you can always download this from CHTA's website after the fact. But I really appreciate everyone's taking your time, taking a few minutes out of your morning to join us. Again, I'm Kevin Goldstein. I head the Energy and Sustainability Division of HVS. For those of you not familiar with HVS, as Frank mentioned, we are a hospitality consultancy. We're probably best known for our appraisals, development feasibility studies. We do several thousand of those engagements worldwide each year. Going beyond that, we're in a number of other verticals. We have a division that places capital. We have a division that does executive search. I head the one vertical of the company that focuses on energy and utility costs at hotels. And as you probably sensed, sorry, I need to go forward. We're going to spend today speaking about reducing utility costs at hotel and resort properties. And as you have probably gathered, we are primarily a financially based consultancy. And because of that, we tend to look at issues like being green and being sustainable through primarily a financial lens, really focusing on the P&L impacts and on investing wisely and intelligently in your properties. So the purpose of this presentation is to really walk us through different operating strategies, different investments that hotel owners and operators can make to reduce your utility costs. What we found in doing this at a number of different hotel assets, big hotels, small hotels, full service, focused service hotels throughout the world, is that it's generally possible to reduce utility costs at hotels anywhere in the range of 5 to 25%. We've seen the numbers. We've seen the P&L before and after. I think these numbers are readily achievable. And obviously, if you're reducing your utility costs, you're increasing your operating profitability, which in turn is improving the underlying valuation of your hotel asset. And generally what we found is to get to the higher end of the range, at the lower end between, let's say, 0 and 10% savings, there are a lot of operating activities and low-cost strategies that you can do. These are in-house activities that can perhaps don't cost anything or can be funded out of an operating budget. But to truly get to the higher end of the range, generally, in my experience, anywhere north of a 10% reduction, typically the owner is going to have to be prepared to invest some level of capital into the property or to take on some level of debt to actually execute the various projects. So, you know, we at HVS think the bottom line is the most important business driver. Certainly, I believe Tanae has spoken about these. Some of the secondary or what we call ancillary business drivers. I think investing in your utility, in your buildings, really focusing on your utility consumption helps certainly mitigate risk. It mitigates the risk of rising commodity rates, which I guess unfortunately a lot of us throughout the Caribbean region are all too familiar with. It helps your properties maintain P&L competitiveness with your competitors and your peers. Also, if you're looking at building equipment, if you're taking a really good close look at it, it helps you understand your liabilities of the property. So what equipment is at the end of its service life, what equipment may fail over our operating hold of the property. If you're looking at the equipment as well, new equipment oftentimes can have a pretty nice guest enhancement in terms of better acoustics, better guest comfort, better temperature. If for the operators out there, if you take a good close look at utility spend, it can certainly enhance your owner relations. This is an area that I see a lot of management companies, to be quite candid, fall down in. I think if you're looking for new management contracts, if you're just looking for something to help maintain the relationship with your owner, certainly this is an oftentimes overlooked area. Of course, there are corporate responsibility benefits. There are marketing benefits if you're going after green meetings or a specific demographic of guests. We see all of these factors as a fantastic side benefit of a simple business argument that makes bottom line sense. So really, I think philosophically what we're talking about is investment at the end of the day, whether it's an investment of time or resources or your capital or preferably someone else's capital. We're still talking about investment, and in our opinion, any discussion of investment should also consider risk. So we've developed this kind of wheel, and really we're going to spend the majority of this presentation walking around the different steps in this wheel. I think the take-home message is that as you go from establishing goals to benchmarking the property to actually investing, the level of investment increases, and thereby your financial risk and your exposure increases concurrently. So what we recommend to owners and to our clients and to operators as well is to really try and reduce the upfront costs, reduce the initial soft costs until you figure out if there's opportunity. If you truly believe or your consultants believe there is opportunity, then spend some more significant levels of capital, and this minimizes your financial exposure as you go through trying to reduce your utility costs. So the good news is step one, the first step, doesn't take any money. It's basically trying to define what you're hoping to accomplish at the property. And in my opinion, this should not take an owner and an operator longer than a 5-minute conversation to come to clarity on. The first goal is really what specifically are we trying to accomplish? Are you looking to improve your P&L performance? Are you looking to hedge against inflating utility costs, respond more competitively to meeting RFPs? These are what I would call specific business drivers, and I think it's nice to say we're trying to be green, but going beyond that, what specifically are you trying to accomplish at the property? The first question I ask most of our clients is, what is your ownership objective for the asset? Is it a long-term hold? Is it a short-term hold? Are you looking to renovate? Are you looking to add on another wing? Are you looking to refinance? What specifically are you looking to do with the property? And based upon that, what are the investment criteria? You know, if you find ROI, return on investment opportunities, is there a limit of capital? It's X $100,000 and that's it. Is it based on a payback period? We're willing to categorically invest in anything with a 2-year or less payback. So I think it's helpful to define those because everything else, all of the work that you put in kind of stems back to matching those criteria. I think certainly look at forthcoming renovations. If you're going to have mechanical contractors on site, if you're going to redo your lobby or your guest rooms, you can realize an economy of scale by combining this type of work with other renovations at the property. And finally, are you the owner or are you the operator aligned with the owner? Are you aligned with your consultants so that one of you is not going down a path that ultimately will not be approved? So really, once you've defined your goals, the next step is, in my opinion, take a paper-based look at the property. These are actually real metrics. We got these ahead of a recent consulting engagement that HVS undertook, and this was quite literally all that I had ahead of going to a property and ahead of submitting a scope of work to an owner. And these are metrics. The graph on the left is water consumption, and it's telling a bit of a story. You can see that in 2014, water consumption increased over 2013 levels. So something obviously happened there. We, because we're an appraisal company, we have a lot of comp set data. The graph on the top right looks at the utility cost per available room on an annualized basis. And you can see this particular property was trailing the comp set. So all of your direct competitors are spending less in utilities each year. And the third graph shows that costs are rising. So really, these are some simple exercises that you can do just by looking closely at what you're spending or talking with some of your competitors, perhaps on island. And you can try to figure out, okay, how generally are we performing? And this is a situation where we went into the property. This was enough to tell me there's opportunity. And sure enough, we found a tremendous level of opportunity for this property. So the next step is some form of auditing. And auditing can be done both in-house. You can quite literally audit by grabbing a camera or a cell phone and going around and taking pictures of areas where you're wasting utility costs. Or you can bring in a third party. This is something that HVS engages in. I think if you are going to go out of house, it's very important to identify the right consultant. And you first want to ask, you know, have we reviewed the qualifications and experience? Are they an engineering consultancy? Are they a hospitality consultancy? Do they understand what it's like to work in a hotel? You know, I've seen a lot of energy audits fall down because you have a bunch of very technically proficient people come in, but they don't understand hospitality and brand standards and product improvement plans and keeping guests happy. So that's something to watch out for. Are they sending the right individuals? You generally don't want the kids just out of college with a checklist. You want some pretty senior people to truly diagnose and truly cost out your opportunities. Will the energy audit look at other utilities such as water and sewerage, waste recycling? We see all sorts of opportunity to reduce costs in those areas as well. And finally, what does their report look like? Can you use it to facilitate business decision-making, or is it a bunch of technical gibberish that's going to sit on a desk for a year? So once you start undertaking the audits, these are all pictures from actual hotels. These are quite literally Kevin Goldstein and my team walking through with a Polaroid and taking pictures or a cell phone. But we see these again and again and again. And these are things that operators can do in-house, controlling cooking gas, cleaning refrigeration coils. We see quite a lot of using water to defrost. Faucet aerators and F&B operations, of course, the engineers screw them in, and the F&B team unscrews them as quickly as they can because they want the high volume of water flow. But it all costs money at the end of the day. Turning down of lights in guest rooms after housekeeping is done and after the QA/QC walkthrough has been done can save a lot of energy. One of our biggest findings was renegotiating a waste contract, just taking a contract out to competitive bid. With one phone call, we were able to reduce waste costs $18,000 per year at a property. So where you do have a competitive market for waste or utilities, which is probably not quite often in the Caribbean, there certainly is opportunity there. Going into the low-cost strategies, these are things that don't cost a lot but can have nice paybacks, typically occupancy sensing on lighting, especially for areas like meeting rooms and in the back of the house. These can have a decent payback, and I would say especially in the Caribbean, where you're most likely spending north of 15 or 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Leaking toilets we see again and again and again, and it's just easiest to replace all the flappers at once and do it and be done with it. Any type of water-cooled HVAC, so whether it's an ice machine or refrigeration that's using water for cooling, the paybacks are quite nice there. Other strategies, shower heads cash flow quite nicely at the majority of properties. Leaking walk-in doors, that's a walk-in refrigeration unit, and you can see there's no door sweep on the bottom of the door, so you have the cold air leaving. Leak detection, we actually just found a leak that was leaking at the rate of $15,000 a year. So we see these types of opportunities at the majority of hotels that we visit. And then going beyond that, there are all sorts of capital opportunities as well. I think everyone in the region should be considering lighting, demand responsive ventilation, things like cooling towers. So when you're done the audit, hopefully the report that your consultant or that your internal team delivers to you looks something like this, which is a list of opportunities, the cost, the annualized savings, if there are any incentives to take into account, and the payback period so that you can make your business decisions about which ones you want to execute. And I think finally, as with any investment, you should be monitoring that investment over time. So don't make the investment and forget about it and assume everything is going correct. Try to track your utility costs after the fact. If they're promising a 10% reduction, have you actually experienced that on paper? So this is a case study. This is actually an HVS client, a boutique hotel, where we came in, we brought in an engineering team, executed just over $300,000 in projects that were offset by a $100,000 incentive from the local utility. But the bottom line impact was actually noticeable on the bottom line. We increased gross operating profitability, the GOP margin, over 1% at this property, and applying a market-specific cap rate, we've actually driven value by over $1 million. So these are the types of numbers we love to see, and these are achievable for a lot of hotels out there. So to kind of summarize what we've discussed thus far, get your owners, or if you're an operator, get your owner. If you're an owner, get your operator engaged early in the process. Try to identify what you can do in-house versus where you may need some external support, and typically that external support is in the area of engineering. Stringent, defensible project underwriting. Do you believe the economics that are being presented? Do they have a strong engineering foundation? Can you replicate the calculations yourself? You want to be cautious about anyone who's tied up with a particular vendor or manufacturer, that they're therefore inherently biased to recommend that manufacturer, so being vendor neutral is good. Being cautious regarding incentives and subsidies. An incentive, in my experience, takes a good project and makes it better. It does not generally take a bad project and turn it into a good project. We like to see hotel owners and operators retain control over the projects and competitively bid it, just like any front-of-the-house renovation. Why should that differ for a back-of-the-house renovation? And again, having someone experienced to oversee your construction. So putting, I guess, back on my Caribbean hat, I think some of the implementation considerations and some of the challenges that you may experience in the region are, one, identifying a good project execution team. In the kind of spirit of keeping the soft costs low, I would certainly advise looking on island first or in country first. Perhaps if there is no one available locally, regionally second, and internationally third. I think if you can find qualified expertise locally, It's going to minimize your due diligence exposure and really get you to the next phase, which is the underwriting phase. Cost estimation, if you throw some costs at projects, are they accurate costs? Are you accounting for international procurement? Are you accounting for logistics, shipping, stamp tax, duties, the local cost of labor? These are all things that you want to consider strongly. If you can negotiate with governments, if you're not under some type of heads of agreement, if you're an international hotel or an international investor, can you negotiate for reduced stamp tax, reduced import duties, because these are environmental projects? Pre-construction, going through design-build agreements, I think is viable, and keeping projects on time and on budget. So I know we're at the end of our session, but I think my general outlook for the region, there are a lot of very strong encouraging factors which I guess point toward investing in this area. You've got high commodity rates, there's an aging building stock, and with older buildings there's a high probability of ROI projects. You have seasonal occupancy, so when guests are not in the rooms during hurricane season, for example, you should be shutting down appliances. Anything with a motor or a compressor should be turned down. And alternative energy should be viable as well, sun and solar and wind. I think the constraints in the region are a lack of available comp set data to compare your hotel to another hotel. There can be a lack of diversity amongst the local, population of engineers and contractors. Shipping, procurement, logistics can burden project costs, and monopolistic utilities can also make business difficult in terms of securing your permits. And Frank and I were discussing prior to this, the lack of financing is also key. If you do not have financing available, it will hinder the amount of capital projects that you can undertake. These are some factors, and we'll send the presentation out afterwards. If you hit any of these or several of these, it may be a good idea to take a look at utility costs in your hotel. And I think finally, some resources. These are good cost-benefit resources for a number of hotels. What you really want to look for is detailed cost-benefit analyses to help you as an owner or operator evaluate a particular project. So these are some of the ones that we found out there. So that is the presentation. I know it's a lot, and we compressed a lot into a very brief time frame, but I think the bottom line message that I would like to convey to everyone is it's good business. It's a good business strategy to focus very closely on your utility costs and your annual spend. It's a good business strategy to look for quick payback, low-risk opportunities to reduce your utility costs and take advantage of all the resources out there for you, whether through CAST or CHTA or OBMI or local consultants, international consultants. There are a lot of resources out there.
Thank you so much, Kevin. All right, so we're going into our Q&A section of the webinar. At this point, you can go ahead and write Kevin any questions that you have. Also, feel free, if we run out of time, because we are a little bit limited, to a few more. We only have a few more minutes left. If you would rather email Kevin, you can go ahead and do so at kgoldstein@hvs.com. That's KGOLDSTEIN@hvs.com. And let's see here if we have, oops. Sorry, guys. One more second. See if we have any questions. I know that our main concern as far as implementing anything that's to do with sustainability, particularly regarding financing for small hotels. What are steps they can take, because the finance is always a concern, what are steps that small hotels can take to cutting their operational costs, probably not to do investment onto their properties, but small things that they can do on a day-to-day basis that will impact their bottom line?
Yeah, I think from a small hotel perspective, you probably want to operate first. And I think big things to look are small it's the operation. We find lots of opportunities in kitchens that not being turned off, lack of areas for taps. You'll probably want to look at an electric operation in-house, running that efficiently. I think really using different resources out there to identify best management practices, looking at, for example, the American Hotel Lodging Association, looking at the CATS and the CHTA toolkits, taking advantage of, taking as a consultant myself, really try to identify 3 or 4 things that you can do in-house without the need to invest. And we find the opportunities are ample at hotel properties. And maybe going beyond that, you can start looking at simple things in your guest room, measuring your shower heads to see what flow rates they're flowing at. You know, if you're anywhere north of 2 gallons per minute or 2.5 gallons per minute, you can probably reduce them. Or not.
What?
Okay. So, you know, those things that if you start identifying opportunities and using a calculator you can oftentimes find online, you can start saving for them or perhaps budgeting for them, you know, when financing may be available in the future.
All right. What I think we're going to do then is, we're not getting any, go ahead and write your questions over to Kevin. If you want to chat about Kevin, please do so via email or just go ahead and submit your questions right now.
Kevin, I think I do have another question. In terms of when we already spoke about small and medium enterprises, but what about some of our larger hotel operators that maybe have the ability to make those investments? What will be some of the main things that you would suggest that they look into investing in first and foremost that can allow them to receive the greatest ROI in the quickest amount of time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's a lot of our clients asking us, what is the highest and best use of our capital and property? I think one way to do that is to do a full building audit, which is certainly going to have an expense, and the purpose of the audit would be to qualify and quantify all the investments that an owner could consider making. I think another way to do it, though, is just to start with some givens. You know, things like lighting. We see lighting again and again and again at every hotel, and even if you've relamped, let's say, 5 to 10 years ago, LED technology has come along to such an extent that there's probably a very reasonable ROI and a very low level of risk by relamping again. I think, you know, along the same line, plumbing fixtures are just a given. You can look at those. They're very easy to measure. They're easy to quantify. Any type of equipment at the end of its service life, if you're on PTAX and they're on, let's say, a 12-year life cycle, if you're in year 11, it's probably time to start looking at that, calculating the ROI, and budgeting for replacement. So I think you can do it a couple of ways. You can look at everything and try to figure out the highest and best use, or you can just take a few givens. And I think certainly lighting, plumbing, older HVAC equipment, in my opinion, is a given. It's most likely going to cash flow. We haven't talked about behaviors, and some of our audits that we've done. We haven't spoken much to the point of behaviors, and if you could maybe get some tips, Kevin, on some practical things that could be done to begin to change behaviors, and how they can reduce the costs as well, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it truly is an operating activity. You know, in my experience, it's got to start at the property level from the GM on down, and it's got to be communicated through all of the departments. We find quite often that we walk around with our camera and take pictures, and we identify all these opportunities. And I think, you know, it's a lot of what we do is common sense. It's we find a tremendous level of opportunity by walking the property at 2 in the morning after the management has gone home. The cleaning team is at it, and there is just every light is on. The faucets are all running wide open. The appliances are still on. These are easy things to find, and I can certainly encourage the management out there to go back to the properties in the evening and see what you see. But I would also encourage you to communicate it to your various department heads. Let them know it is a priority under your management. It's a priority for the owner as well. Unless it's actually communicated to the department heads and in turn to their staff, you know, chances are it'll change one day but change right back the next. And I think turnover of staff is another issue. It's got to be communicated in the daily stand-ups, in the weekly meetings. It's got to be recommunicated again and again and again until it becomes cultural and just part of the standard way of doing business. So I think there is a lot of opportunity. You can reduce OPEX pretty significantly from an operator perspective, but you need a strong culture, and that's got to be led from the top.
All right, well, with that, we're going to end our webinar. Thank you so much, Kevin, for participating and for all this wonderful information. Just so everyone knows, all of this information, the PowerPoint, as well as the video of this webinar will be made available on the CHTA website under our Learning Tools. If you go to our homepage, click on Learning Tools by CHTA, and you will later in the day today find all of that information, and it will also be emailed to you along with 5 takeaways that Kevin is going to outline for you and will email to you before the end of the day today. Thank you so much for attending and have a wonderful day.